Oh, I forgot to mention President Joe Biden doing it in his trousers on the stage at the Normandy commemoration. I'll try and get back to that if you get my drift. But starting with the extraordinary story that is breaking this evening, that little Rishi Sunak, who made the colossal blunder of beginning a general election months before any of his MPs imagined that it was going to be held, before 184 Tory candidates had even been picked, and who then proceeded to fall over every tiny obstacle, make a mess of every single event, and short of his trousers falling down, live on national television, there's not much more that could go wrong for little Rishi. I'm supposed to feel sorry for him, but I'm afraid it couldn't happen to a nicer fellow. And he has the compensation of being the richest Prime Minister Britain ever had. He's got a green card in his pocket, and he's off to California in the morning or the morning after. The proximate reason for this dramatic turn of events is that Rishi Sunak is predicted to lose his own parliamentary seat, along with maybe hundreds of his parliamentary colleagues losing theirs. Yes, that's right. Count Binface, his rival in Richmond in Yorkshire, one of the safest Tory seats in the whole country, formerly held by William Hague, is on the list of losses for the Conservatives on the 4th of July. It is a truly astounding turn of events. It is unprecedented. We have never before, ever, had a Prime Minister call an election and then quit in the middle of that election. There's no MPs, there's no parliamentary 1922 committee to have a vote of no confidence, to appoint a new leader, and so the men in grey suits are back. And they are going to, I'm told from the most impeccable of sources, appoint Lord David Cameron as his interim successor. I've got to say, the only way is up, David, even with your ermine on and your financial scandals tumbled out of the closet, your tax haven, Golden Islands in the Caribbean, your record on foreign affairs and on other things. The only way is up. You could only do a better job than Rishi Sunak. I mean, Huggy the Bear could only do a better job than Rishi Sunak. There's a hilarious video online of Americans being asked what they think of Rishi Sunak. And most of them ask, what's that? Not who's that, but what's that? As Joe Biden famously said, Rashid Sunak, go figure. The new British Prime Minister is for the off. Now, I think this will improve the Tories' fortunes from the currently catastrophically miserable levels at which they stand, but it certainly won't save their government. And David Cameron won't be leader for long. I think the fragrant Penny Mordaunt is almost certain to get it, except there's a vile character called Braverman, another one or two vile rivals who will capitalize on the big decision the Tories have got to make. Do they go nice? Do they go nasty? Do they try and distinguish themselves from Mr. Nasty, Nigel Farage, who's back in the frame and is vaulting forward for the Reform Party in their national opinion poll standings? Will they go nice to differentiate themselves from him, in which case it must be the bouffon, Penny Mordaunt, surely. She even sounds as if she might be European. But if they go nasty, they'll go for Badenoch or Braverman, or maybe both of them. Wouldn't that be a rival for Nigel Farage? Couldn't get nastier than those two people. But one way or another, Reform are going to take over the Tory party. They'll either formally take over or they will supplant it, just as Labour supplanted the Liberals in the early first 25 years or so of the 20th century. So in the first 25 years of the 21st century, the Reform right-wing nationalists will take over the Conservative Party, formally or informally. Now, I'm asked to shed a tear by every Liberal commentator in the land that the socialist Prime Minister of Germany has lost the German election. In the European Parliament elections, which were held on Friday and over this weekend and are now being counted, the Farage party in Austria has triumphed and the Farage party in Germany has won the election. Little soldier Schulz is as socialist as Adolf Hitler. He is wedded to war, wedded to neoliberalism, wedded to everything that is the opposite of socialism. And so I have zero sympathy for him. His flag, his name as a socialist means nothing to me. It is the beef that I'm interested in. So where's the beef with little Schulz? Well, he has presided over the absolute collapse of the German economy, the absolute bankruptcy of the German government's foreign policy, a policy of belligerence and war towards their neighbor Russia, who occupied a part of their country, who liberated their people from Nazism. They have turned Russia into a bogeyman, and in so doing, they have presided over the deindustrialization of their country. So hell mend little Schulz. I don't have to support the AfD to hope that they will at least act in Germany's interest rather than act in the interests of the United States. Because Schulz did all of this on the orders of the lunatic Joe Biden, whose conduct at the commemoration, 80th anniversary of the brave men and the thousands of martyrs who fell on the beaches at Normandy along the coastline in 1944 on June 6th and began the liberation of a part of Western Europe. His conduct was unbecoming even of him. It's one thing to soil yourself in front of His Holiness the Pope. At least the moving cameras were not there. The moving bowels were, however, caught on moving cameras on stage in Normandy. Anyone who's got a toddler knows the positions that were being struck. And everyone who's ever had a toddler knows that it can smell quite bad quite quickly after it. And Mrs. Biden clearly caught the whiff of the situation and led him away from the other leaders and presumably off for a shower. At least one hopes so. But the situation of Germany is now in a crisis situation. I think that the German government needs to repair its relations with Russia, needs to pull out of the NATO front, and needs to tell Joe Biden that Germany will not destroy itself for the edification of an administration here today, gone tomorrow in Washington. But I don't have any confidence that that's what they will do, because I've seen Meloni. I saw the Farage victory in Italy. I saw Meloni and I knew her reputation. She was an Italian nationalist. She was going to stand against the European Union. She was going to stand against NATO, and in fact has become one of the most slavish clients of the American pattern of vassal states in Western Europe. I have seen how Le Pen, full of right-wing anti-monopoly, anti-globalist rhetoric, has trimmed and trimmed and trimmed all of that rhetoric and is now really a common or garden nationalist. with no intention of confronting Washington on behalf of her people. And I've seen Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage is a cheeky chappy, an eloquent man of the people type, gin and jag and golf club bore type fellow who strikes a chord with the English, with the lower middle class in England and some of the working class in England. But I've seen him transformed from a Britain firster into an Israel firster. I've seen him transformed from a Britain first to an American first politician. So I have no confidence that any of the so-called far-right nationalist organizations will be anything other than a new crop of sycophants for Washington. But we will see. Benny Gantz leaving the Netanyahu government in Tel Aviv is of greater significance to world events. The situation now in Israel is so febrile you could cut it with a knife. The hundreds of thousands who are out demonstrating practically nightly for the downfall of Netanyahu and for a new election, to pick a new government, to take a new policy towards freeing the hostages and repairing their ruptured relations with the United States, is now unstoppable. And Gantz has read the room. He's decided to leave Netanyahu before the public left him. And this is of grave significance for Netanyahu because, as everyone now knows, if you are a regular on the mother of all talk shows, this is edition number 350, by the way. Big congratulations to all my colleagues and to all of you in the audience. 350 episodes under our belt. But if you are a regular, you already know that losing office means losing liberty for Benjamin Netanyahu. He's a convicted criminal whose imprisonment has only been stayed because of the partial immunity that he enjoys as Prime Minister. When he's no longer Prime Minister, he's no longer free to walk the streets of Israel. He'll have to flee to the United States and seek asylum or disappear behind bars, as several of his predecessors have already done. Now, I wouldn't like you to have the impression that these hundreds of thousands on the streets to get rid of Netanyahu want a more humane policy towards the Palestinians. That's very definitely not true. I wouldn't like you to think that Benny Gantz would be any better than Benjamin Netanyahu, because that is very definitely not true. In fact, you could make a case that Netanyahu is the least extreme member of his current cabinet. Just think about that. The situation in Gaza yesterday went from bad to worse. The worst day of the war was yesterday. In the middle of a British general election, in the middle of an American presidential election, the policies of both American and British governments towards the conflict in Gaza are right at the center of public discourse, if not media discourse, in the election in both countries. 274 refugees in the Nuseirat refugee camp in central Gaza. 274 people were killed. 75% of them women and children. They were murdered by gunfire or by bombs. The Israeli Air Force flattened the camp with bombs, and a group of Israeli commandos who came in via the United States pier that they built for humanitarian purposes in Gaza were smuggled in under the cover of being aid. The trucks came in purporting to be full of food and medical supplies for the stricken, famine-stricken, ailing people of the Gaza Strip. But in fact, they were filled with Israeli gunmen who dismounted from the trucks and massacred everyone that they saw. They massacred small children, They massacred bigger children. They massacred women. They massacred men. They massacred anybody, everybody that they saw. And the death toll is only half of the story. 274 were killed, but 700 were wounded, maimed, many of them forever. I just saw a figure that 16,000 Palestinian children have died in the last 8 months at the hands of the Netanyahu murder gang, but twice that number, 32,000 Palestinian children have had their limbs amputated. And I've now just saved on my phone a picture the likes of which I never imagined that I would see. A small Palestinian child in Gaza, dead in the mouth of a dog. The dogs are feasting on the bodies in Gaza, and what a feast they had yesterday. I'm spending more time than usual on that point for this reason. I have watched the British media, and I understand the American media is even worse. I've watched the British media on this all day, and every single outlet has treated what happened in Nusrat camp yesterday as a triumph, as a kind of raid on Entebbe, as a kind of adventure story, when in fact it was an act of criminal lawlessness, illegal under every article of war, illegal under the Geneva Conventions, illegal under the laws against crimes against humanity. This use of firepower from the air and from the land, killing and maiming the best part of 1,000 people to rescue 4 hostages, is an extraordinary indictment on our own media and on the Israeli state itself. But here's the rub. Even if they don't care about the Palestinian blood that was shed in oceans yesterday in a refugee camp where everyone in it is a responsibility of the so-called international community under international law, the ocean of Palestinian blood wasn't mentioned, but neither was the fact that the Israeli terror gang also slaughtered 3 other hostages. They murdered 274 people, maimed 700 people, and murdered 3 of their own hostages, one of them an American citizen. This has been completely blacked out of the media coverage of this event. It's being treated as a kind of Super Bowl event, when in fact it is a war crime. It is a war crime to kill hundreds of people, to recapture 3 of your own, 2 of whom were Israeli soldiers. Most of you have been led to believe that these Israeli hostages were young women just strolling down the street. 2 of the 3 were Israeli soldiers, prisoners of war. And the 3rd was the chief security officer at the Nova Music Festival, which was a target in the end for the Palestinian resistance groups when they broke out of the concentration camp on October the 7th. And many people were killed there. Many of them were killed by the Israeli forces themselves. Many, no doubt, were killed by the organizations, not just Hamas, but many organizations involved in that concentration camp breakout on October the 7th. So the 3 that they rescued were all security people, 2 of them military prisoners of war. The 3 who they killed included an American tourist with an American passport in their pocket. And the American government has hailed the operation as an unqualified success. And nobody gives a toss about the 1,000 Palestinian refugees, 1,000 who were either murdered or maimed in that attack. And therein lies the problem we have. Jackson Hinkle is in Russia. He's at the St. Petersburg Forum that our own Scott Ritter was forbidden to attend in the land of the free, in the interests of freedom and all of that. We'll hear from Jackson right after this. Stay tuned. It's the mother of all talk shows.